It's as if the hands have been broken from the face of the clock. We don't know what time it is, but God knows what time it is, and He has a plan and a promise. And when the seventh or Sabbath millennium begins, we are going to see some incredible events as we come to the seventh month of the seventh millennium, because the seventh month feast will be fulfilled when the day or millennium of the Lord begins. And we find ourselves right on the cusp of this at this point. It was 3 years ago that I presented and defended in Jerusalem the first astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar since the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And it was Rabbi Hillel II in the 4th century that made advanced mathematical and astronomical calculations when we no longer lived in the land of Israel. And those calculations were made so that we could have a projected calendar that could be used with His people being scattered over 3 continents. And so when we weren't in the land and couldn't keep God's original reckoning of time, then an alternative calendar was produced that at the time was extremely accurate. But now, 1,600 years later, those calculations were not accurate enough to keep the calendar on track over the long duration with which it's been in use. And so where we find ourselves at this particular point in time is that most of the time we are celebrating the feast days on the wrong day according to the modern Jewish calendar. And many times we're completely in the wrong month according to God's original reckoning of time. Now, whereas this may have been acceptable in generations past, now that we are back in the land, there is no reason why we can't go back to God's original reckoning of time. And also, what we have found ourselves embroiled in and completely immersed in the culture in the West, is that we have inherited pagan celebrations and renamed pagan celebrations, again, which have no basis in truth or reality. Some of them are not even renamed, such as Easter, which is the name of the bare-breasted fertility goddess of the East, who came out of heaven in this giant egg, landing in the Euphrates River at sunrise on the first Sunday after the vernal equinox, busting out, turning a bird into an egg-laying rabbit. And then after that point in time, the priest of Easter would then sacrifice infants and then take the eggs of Easter and dye them in the blood of sacrificed infants. Many of these same traditions are carried on today in the name of those people who say that they're worshiping the true God, but really do not even understand that some of the things that they have inherited in some of these occult holidays have actually been brought into what the Christians consider their church. And so it is that when we have inherited these things, but we find that we have forsaken the feast of the Lord, which are all prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come, we find ourselves again with the hands broken from the face of the clock. We do not understand God's reckoning of time, but we also have been shut out from understanding the feast of the Lord, which the New Testament says are all shadow pictures of good things to come. And so it is that Israel understood for centuries, for generations, that each one of the feasts of the Lord were holy rehearsals, holy convocations, which are holy mikra, or holy rehearsals, that we look back at good things that had happened in the past, such as Passover when we left Egypt. We understood these things as good things that happened in the past. But yet, until the spring feasts were fulfilled, we did not understand that they were also shadow pictures of what the Messiah would accomplish when the Messiah comes. And so now what we are going to see is get an understanding, a perspective of that. Because we see that in the Gospel of John, Yohanan was a first century Jewish follower of the Jewish Messiah. And it is in his gospel, in his record, that he says, I have not written everything that could be written or should be written. The world wouldn't even be able to contain the scrolls of the things that should be written about Jesus of Nazareth. But he said, but this I have written, that you might know that Yahshua of Nazareth is the Messiah, the only begotten Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. Now, How does a Jewish disciple of the Messiah prove in his culture to his people that Yahshua is the Messiah? How does he do it? Of all the things that could and should be written, the world wouldn't be able to contain the scrolls. What is it that he selects, that he uses, that proves that he is Messiah? John shows how Jesus of Nazareth fulfilled the spring feast of the Lord just as they had been rehearsed every year, year after year, century after century, for over 1,000 years. And that each one of these feasts were a prophetic shadow picture that we were required, Israel was required to go up to Jerusalem to these feasts, to these rehearsals, and every one of these feasts were embedded with an expectation that this could be the time that the Messiah is revealed. And so every time we came to the feast, it was with that expectation, this may be the year. We would come up, we would purify ourselves, we would mikvah or baptize ourselves before the festivities began, expecting that maybe this is the year that the Messiah comes. And we see that the Gospel of John details how Yahshua of Nazareth fulfills every detail of the spring feast just as they've been rehearsed for thousands of years.
Michael Rood will return with some closing thoughts in just a moment.
The four Gospels record how the Messiah fulfilled the prophetic shadow pictures embedded in the spring feast of the Lord, just as they had been rehearsed by the Jewish people from the time of King David until the destruction of the Second Temple by Rome. When we understand the intricacies of the shadow pictures that the Messiah has already fulfilled, we will be prepared to explore the prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come in the future as the Messiah fulfills the fall feast of the Lord, as recorded in the last book of the Hebrew Scriptures, the book of the Revelation. We invite you to join us again next time for Episode 2 in the 26-part series on the Prophecies in the Feast of the Lord, A Thief in the Night. This is Michael Rood from Jerusalem bidding you shalom, peace. And I'll see you when the smoke clears.